How do I make sure as a candidate I'm able to beat the ATS system?
You basically write what they want on the resume.
Welcome back to my podcast, Extraordinary with Chirag. Today I am in conversation with Luki. No, not the Lord of Mischief. He is, though, the Lord of Career Development and Job Search. Well, Luki started his career as a consultant at Deloitte, where he worked for over a decade. Post which, he founded his company called Focus.Inspired, where his mission is to help mid level career professionals level up and find their dream jobs. In addition to this, Luki is an author. He's written two books called Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier and also a podcast host. Did I mention that Luki is also recognized as one of the top voices on LinkedIn on career development? I had a fantastic time talking to Luki about how to be strategic about our goals, life, and career in general. In addition to that, Luki shares some very juicy details about how to be strategic about your job search and how to build a winning resume that actually beats the ATS system. I definitely encourage you to check out the actionable insights section. You will find tips and tricks that you can apply to your job search immediately. The one thing that I want to leave you with from our conversation is being strategic and intentional is the key to success. Before I let you go, a quick sponsor note. Today's episode is brought to you by Kent Water Purification Systems. They are the pioneers in providing you with healthy, tasty, and chemical free water. If you're interested in their services, please contact their team on the number given below, and somebody will be in touch with you shortly. Thank you, Kent, for believing in my mission. Now, enjoy the conversation.
Mhm.
Luki, thank you for doing this. I'm excited that you're on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be a guest on your show. So thank you for putting this together.
That's awesome. Uh, I have been doing a little bit of research, and for people who don't know you yet, Luki is an entrepreneur, career coach, author, keynote speaker, and a podcast host. That's a lot of things going on at the same time, Luki.
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of the same thing, just in a different package, right? So I speak about the SWIKE, the stuff I wish I knew earlier, or sometimes referred to as what you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. So you'll probably hear that as part of my podcast and within the books and some of the talks that I go through, right? So I'm a huge advocate of soft skills and mentorship and things like that, and wish that there was more of that happening in the school system, in jobs, careers, and like just everywhere.
That's a great start. And you had this post up very recently on LinkedIn, and it also is in your bio when I was doing the research that you started out as a shy introvert computer scientist, and then you moved out of your comfort zone into management consulting. These two can't be more far from each other. And you completed your BSc in computer sciences from the University of Toronto and then joined Deloitte,
Yeah.
one of the leading consulting firms. Now, can you share your experience from your student life to how your journey was stepping out of your comfort zone and going into consulting? How did you grow within the organization? Let's start from back in the day.
Yeah, so the transition, if we were talking about student life, I mean, I wasn't the greatest student. So in high school, I actually did pretty well, but I was a little bit lazy in my final year. I had what they call a fixed mindset, which I only learned about later on. And I thought I was supposed to be smart and I was supposed to get whatever marks I got. And as a result, I didn't put a lot of effort into it. And when you don't put in a lot of effort, then your marks reflect it. So I wanted to get into Waterloo actually, and because that was the thing for computer science. I was in tech. A lot of the folks that I hung around with were coders. I wanted to code video games. That was what I wanted to do as a career path. And because I didn't try as hard as I could have, should have, then I didn't get in. So I lucked out to where I was able to get into U of T, and I chose the Scarborough campus because they had a co-op program. So I highly recommend all the students out there that if you're going for any sort of degree, find one with some co-op or work integrated learning, something where you can get really practical experience, because I find that was one of the things that really helped me land a job. So in to the transition part, from school to work, yeah, I graduated when the dot-com bubble had burst, right? 9/11 just happened, SARS was on its way, right? So it was really tough for folks in tech to get a job. And the way that I got it is, I had a friend whose brother, he was looking for a coder, a developer, so he helped me get an interview and I got the job. And as luck would have it, the company was Deloitte. So there was not necessarily a lot of proactivity on my part. It was a bit of dumb luck getting into what you call a very prestigious consulting company. I thought I was working for an accounting firm, right? I didn't really even know what consulting was. And yeah, and then I ended up spending over 12 years there, growing as a developer, then moving into testing, change management, training, project management, advisory. And when you do something for like 12 years, you tend to get a little bit good at it, right? And one of my other claims to fame is I used to also run the undergrad campus recruiting program, right? So from I think around 2009 to 2015 when I left, I literally had the list that said yes or no for anyone that got hired across all the universities in Canada, right? So I know a few things about resumes, interviews, networking, and take that experience and share it with other folks, because a lot of students, they have no idea, right? Sometimes why a resume is picked out of the pile, why someone at a networking event is asked for an interview, that sort of thing. So yeah, that was my transition. And yeah, if you want to go into any parts of it, I'm happy to answer more.
So
Yeah.
that's interesting. And you mentioned podcasting in between that. So that's my perfect segue into my next question.
Yeah.
Of course, a passion point as well. So let's dive into podcasting. What's your goal with the podcast? And what has been, again, the most interesting and satisfying part of this journey of podcasting for you?
Yeah, it goes back to the vision of focus inspired, and what I'm looking to build is, well, I one of my goals was to become one of the quote unquote new billionaires, which is to positively impact 1 billion people. And when I calculated that, if I spent 1 second with each person, it would take me 32 years. So that's obviously not physically possible. So using something like books, using something like podcasts and YouTube videos or what have you, is my hope in to be able to get some of this information out there and to scale. So the goals of the podcast is really to share, again, what you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. And I started off as a solo project where I would kind of record myself, pseudo chapters to the book, right? Other updates or new learnings that I've had. And then I found that it was really hard because I don't know about your audience, but I hate listening to the sound of my own voice on recording or watching myself being recorded. So even doing the first episode was very painful, right? So I had, well, a thought that is probably 2017 where I wanted to record the podcast. And I think the first episode was more like 2020, like 3 years later. And it was really the pandemic that pushed me to do it. It's like, well, what else am I going to be doing? Right. So that really kicked it off. But it was, I probably recorded 2050 versions of episode one prior to that, right? And then I finally said, screw it, let me just do it. So again, the solo episodes, and then I found, because I struggled so much to record those solo episodes, someone said, "Hey, I'd love to share some of my swike with you." And it's like, okay, you want to have a conversation? Let's do it. And then a lot of folks you would have coffee with, and we said, "Oh, that should have been recorded because that would have made a great podcast." And oftentimes it's someone's journey, right? That the not straight line, the what you did with the book, what the squiggly line or what have you,
Yeah.
right? There's so many people doing so many different things, and I chose specifically to have people around me like the GTA, not like the big name celebrities, just to have folks a little bit more accessible, right? So you can say, oh, like they live down the street from me, or they went to my school, or they went to whatever, so that folks can see the potentials of their own journey in someone else out there, right? And learn, right? And I like to capture folks that are often still on the journey, right? So they just left their company and are starting something, or just dove into a new area, right? So it's again just sharing that stuff I wish I knew earlier. If you could have like a little post-it or whatever and send it back in time to young you, what would you want to tell them, right? Because there's so much of that wisdom out there that if folks aren't sharing their story, it's kind of lost. One of my other goals, or one of the other visions for Focus Inspired, is to make Toronto the mentorship capital of the world. And the way that I plan to do that is everyone should have 5 or 10 mentors, right? So reaching out to people to learn about their journeys and like past the success, their stuff I wish I knew earlier. But to me, it's actually more importantly that everyone should have 5 or 10 mentees, people that they are sharing their stuff I wish I knew earlier to the younger folks. Because there's always someone. Like even if you're in university, there's always high school folks. And high school folks, there's elementary school folks, right? And sometimes it's not even a factor of age, right? Because there's some young folks that have done way more than I have, right?
Absolutely.
So they've run podcasts and I'll come to and ask them, hey, how do you do this? Or how did you do that? So it's not necessarily even an age thing. And if you can kind of learn from others that are just a little bit ahead of you or way ahead of you, then like everyone's taking care of everybody. So why would there be war and conflict and things like that? Which kind of goes back to that soft skills development. So it's a kind of utopian vision that if everyone's helping each other, like the world would just be a little bit of a better place.
Definitely. And we have a shared sense of passion there where we want to create that sort of impact and create that positive ripple effect wherein people are helping each other. We learn from each other's journey. And like you said, what resonates with me a lot is the fact that you don't necessarily need to learn from the person who's been there, done everything. But there are
Mm-hmm.
people who are just a little further ahead from you in the
Yeah.
journey and in the process, and they will also be able to tell you a lot more things which are relevant right now. The broad principles of success don't change because you will
Mm-hmm.
need to grind, you will need to put in the hard work, you will need to be resourceful, and when it is your business you will figure it out how to keep afloat and how to have the shortest winter possible in your
Mm-hmm.
analogy. That said, it is important that we are able to also quickly pick and learn from people who've just there in the journey, because one of the things that I would struggle with in the corporate life is the fact that somebody comes to me and tells me, oh, do it this way because I used to do it like this. But
Mm-hmm.
your time of doing that was 10 years back. The landscape has changed, the customer behavior has changed, a lot has changed. So that is not the best analogy. Staying on that topic, and I love the entire vibe of stuff I wish I knew earlier. I want this one question is for myself and for a lot of
Okay.
people who I represent, the immigrant community to Canada. Um,
Okay.
I don't know how many of us have had to traverse with something called the Canadian experience, which I have not been able
Mm.
to wrap my head around. Now,
Mm.
we can be either bitter about it or we can get better at it. I have an expert, so I won't be bitter about it, but I definitely want to understand and unpack this with you that when people come from a different country, and let's talk about mid-level executives and
Sure.
employees who have put in a certain amount of money in their education. They
Mm-hmm.
have worked and they've risen up the corporate ladder. So they understand the fundamentals of business. They know how to successfully grow within their roles. They come to a different country. And then
Mm-hmm.
over here, you're asked, you don't have Canadian experience. What changes during the course of that flight wherein people aren't getting similar jobs? I understand the cultural aspect of it, but I will let you elaborate more on that, because it's important people who are starting out right now or people who are uh, dealing with a setback, which can be a mindset that, hey, I was a senior manager back in my country and I'm not at the same position over here.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that we need to know about Canadian experience and how can we deal with this better?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that statement. And I mean, I would say that there's multiple kind of contexts of Canadian experience for folks, right? So for me, at least in the conversations that I've had with recruiters and other hiring folks, is that Canadian experience is really just like kind of a catch-all phrase to say that, hey, you're good, but you're not necessarily good enough to convince me to hire you without, and I'll use this catch-all of Canadian experience to be polite to kind of to let you down, right? Because I've had folks where they work abroad, they come over here, and they get hired in a similar or possibly even higher or slightly different role than they were. So it's not always the context of folks where you have to go for a lower role or things like that because you need this Canadian experience, right? But usually the difference between those folks is they're able to demonstrate like ability to learn and adapt, right? Because the I guess the root of Canadian experiences, we in Canada do things in such a different way compared to the rest of the world. And sure, there are absolute cultural differences, but I mean, how have you adapted to learn those cultural differences, right? So there are ones, call it the Asian mentality, where there is a definite hierarchy, right? Like you cannot question your boss, right? Whereas here in North America, quote unquote, you should, well, not openly question like in front of everyone and antagonistically do that.
Yeah.
But well, do I know that you can do that? I'm not sure, especially in those middle management roles, right? In an entry level, it's easier because we don't expect you to really know
Yeah.
anything. And well, senior levels is very hard, right? So what I would say to folks is they haven't necessarily articulated themselves in a way where they can prove to or showcase to the interviewer that you want to take a bet on me versus the other candidates who grew up here or have been working here in Canada for a while. So I'm worth the risk, right? Because if you think about it, hiring is just a little bit of risk mitigation, right? Do I believe in this 45-minute interview, right? You being an actor or actress in showcasing your potential, do I believe that you are the best candidate for the job? Because that's the other part of the case where it's super competitive, right? So you have all sorts of folks with masters, doctorates, 10 years of experience, all that sort of stuff. They're all competing for the same jobs. So in this hyper competitive market, like what sets you apart when everybody on paper looks amazing, right? Um, so oftentimes it's that thing like networking. People talk about networking because if I've seen you in my volunteer group and I see you show up on time, you do the work, you're able to adapt and de-escalate conflicts and things like that, and I've seen it in person. I'd rather have that person than this theoretical, hypothetical piece of paper that I spent 45 minutes with and take a risk on it, right? So for those that are kind of hit with that Canadian experience brick upside the head, that sort of thing, I would have them say, you know what, this is where like in Canada, the job search market is dominated by networking, right? The expression not what you know, or who you know,
Yeah.
right? So that kind of translates to the whole Canadian experience paradigm, right? So on paper, it's the what you know, right? But who you know shows me that you can adapt to this so-called Canadian experience, right? So yeah, that's what I'd probably indicate is don't get dissuaded by this Canadian experience, and you can get it right it's through volunteering, not-for-profit work, like networking and all that sort of stuff. And to me, volunteering is one of the best forms of networking, right? And again, it's really that risk mitigation. If you can showcase to someone in a live way that you are worth the risk, I might take you with 10 years experience abroad versus the local person who grew up and did school in the local university and only has 5 or 7 years of experience. But you also have to be aware that there are people who you might have 10 years of experience, they have 12, right? It's a competitive process. So they sell themselves so short and kind of blame it on Canadian experience versus going out there and putting in the work to network, to build relationships with others. And if they spent more time on that versus kind of quote unquote complaining about Canadian experience, then that would be time better served.
I absolutely love
I don't know
that.
if that gets to the heart of what
It
you're
does.
asking, but hopefully it gives
It
some
does. And
thoughts.
I absolutely love what you shared. So much of wisdom and value in that answer of yours. I wish, and genuinely I say this, I wish I knew this earlier when I came here 5 years ago, that how much
Yeah.
volunteering can help you in this process of settling in, because it shows initiative, that you have gone out
Hmm.
and done something instead of just applying for applications through and through and just trying to figure out why is it that you're not being able to crack something. You go out there, you said that you'll meet people, you'll develop a network, which is absolutely important. You also get a bit of flavor of what it is like working with people over here in Canada, because yes, an official environment may be different, but uh, sensibilities do tend to carry on, right? So you will be working with a diverse bunch of people. That's what Canada is all about, understanding that diversity, etc. So there are only positives, and
And I did want to add one
absolutely
thing on that because there is an ugly side to it where there are some people who are biased,
right.
right? And I mean, the good side of that is if you are interviewing for a company where they need this Canadian experience because they don't like international or external people, you can celebrate the fact that you didn't get the job and aren't working for them because that probably wouldn't be a very good work environment, right? So
100%.
you can kind of dodge that bullet. But I would say that for the most part, like call it 80%, 90% of the time, it is just that from that interview you weren't able to articulate, or there weren't any kind of follow on networking or referrals, recommendations that come through that have really allowed me to pick you over a lot of the competition that's out there, which may be local or might have just a different experience than yourself.
Absolutely. And you don't want to go from being jobless to being in a shitty job, working for people that you don't like, and being in an
Sure.
environment that you don't want to be in. So that's a recipe for
Yeah.
disaster. And like you said, that,
Yeah.
if life gives you that opportunity to sort of avoid such an experience, then you should take that. And of course, these things from an applicant standpoint or a job seeker standpoint, you can also assess the culture through these volunteer experiences, if you happen to volunteer in a company that you probably really want to be in. So
Sure.
we're getting warmed up. This is a great segue into the next section, which is called actionable insights. Now, this is
Okay.
essentially an extension of stuff I wish I knew earlier. So I'm just going to
Okay.
throw a lot of questions at you. And the hope, goal, and objective is that anybody listening takes some of this valuable advice and applies to their own journey right now. And hopefully, we will hear that how you and I and this conversation of ours was able to impact somebody positively. So I'm going to dive
Okay.
right into it. Career planning, considering that this is something which is integral to a lot of people for their happiness, because jobs, I believe, are more than just paychecks. I don't
Mm-hmm.
uh, bash 9 to 5. There are people who absolutely love, adore their jobs, and they're doing exceptionally well and creating an impact. But let's start off about career planning with this question. For
Sure.
individuals starting out or feeling unsure about their place in the world, what advice would you give them? And is it important to have it all figured out from the beginning?
Right. So I presume this comes from the folks that are kind of earlier in their career paths, and I mean, if they're unsure.
Yeah.
So what I would encourage folks to do is to figure out what it is that you want. Right. So my career success approach is this very simple: what, why, how. Right. I know folks pointed out to me is like, well, Simon Sinek has a book called "Start with Why." But then the inevitable question is when you start with why, it's like, why what? Right? So that's why I start with what. And in for the younger folks in the start of their careers, a lot of it was provided for them, right? They go to school, they go to university, they get a job, right? But now I graduated and I'm well into my adulting, figuring things out. What is it that I want? right? So there are expectations that, um, like I said, promoted, get married, kids, live house in the suburbs, and all that sort of stuff. But is that actually what you want, right? And I find this is where folks become challenged because they're doing what the parents, what the culture, what the family, what society wants for you versus what do you actually want, right? And once you figure that out, you go to the why, right? And usually that why is reflective, like, well, why you want it? Because my mom wants it for me. My uncle always thought that I would be good at it, and then he wants it for me, or she, or my aunt, or whatever it is, right? Older brother, friends, like they want it for me, but do I actually want it, right? And once you have the what and the why figured out, the how actually is there's a million hows, right? There's so many different ways to get to where you want, right? And kind of alluding to the point of having it all figured out, you absolutely don't, right? So oftentimes, I mean, when you're, call it 22, just graduated, 24, 25, whatever, right? You haven't necessarily experienced the world enough, right? You've been a little bit in your school bubble, right? There are some folks who might have worked abroad and got different experiences, but for the majority of folks, they're just doing what they were supposed to do, what they were told to do, right? So go out and experience, right? And then use that as data points for the next part of the what, right? So as you're doing this what, why, how, like really reassess it like every term, quarter, season, year, right? And say, okay, did all the assumptions that I had when I was 22, when I was 16, or when I'm 35, right? Are they holding? And if they're not, well, you might want to rewrite that what and change things. So what I would suggest again for folks that are unsure, like take some time to think about what they want and is it really what they want or is it from other people, and then go out and experience, right? And realizing that it's okay to not know what you want. I thought I knew what I wanted, and then I thought I knew what I wanted before, and then I thought I knew what I wanted after that, right? But each time you grow. I think there's some sort of quote or meme out there where like when you're like 20, you look at your like 16-year-old self and you're like, oh, how dumb that person was. And then when you're 30, you look at your 20-year-old self and you're like, oh my gosh, they knew nothing. And then when you're 40, you look at your 30-year-old self and like, oh my gosh, they knew even less, right? Because as you experience your world, you realize how much you don't know, right? And then having that comfort, that not having it all figured out is part of the fun, right? That means there's more things to explore, more things to experience, and yeah, I think knowing that. Now, in the moment, it's probably not very comfortable because some people like the stability, like the knowing that this is what they're going for. And yeah, I mean, if you need to start with a short term, like a 1 year, a 5 year plan, right? You don't need a 40-year plan. And then start to recalibrate each time, and then yeah, continue down the path.
That's interesting because I think one of the things that I have found now, and probably uh, a new way of thinking, is that you don't need to necessarily set only 5 year goals. I'm not saying that it's not
Mm-hmm.
important to set a long term career goal or a professional, personal goal, whatever that may be for yourself, but your checks should be far more frequent as opposed to waiting till the end of 3, 4, 5 years and then saying that, hey,
Sure.
am I progressing the way I am supposed to? And
Mm-hmm.
I think if we're being totally honest, you would know the answer very much early in the journey as well if things are going the way one had envisioned or not. So those regular checks are important to maybe reiterate the importance of possibly pivoting if
Mm-hmm.
things are not going your way, because the next question I was going to ask you is we understand how to start now for people who are just at the beginning of their career. They have their entire life ahead of themselves. Then we have folks, and these are ones who you specifically help, ones who are mid career and either at the end of the day, listen, you change jobs because you want to progress. Either it is for a bigger role, which comes essentially with the promise of more money and a better lifestyle and
Okay.
everything that comes
Yeah.
with that, right? How does the order of what, why, and how change for these people in their journey?
I'm not sure if it does change. Again, if they have a clear understanding of what they want and why they want it, the how, again, really moves itself. Because there are the folks that have this concept, oh, I just want to go with the flow and do things as they come, right? Which is fine, right? So to your point about, do you actually need long-term goals? Can you do midterm goals? Yeah, I mean, people are different, and the frequency of it, I think, is super important because your goal is for 5 years or 40 years or whatever is based on the information that you have now. But as you go through it with the more frequent checkpoint, then you can realize, oh, that was not good information, or that was an assumption that's not appropriate. So maybe I'll have to readjust my planning appropriately. Um, so for those that are kind of down the path where they thought they were supposed to go that one path, and use the word supposed, like I hate that word, right? Because what does that even mean? Supposed to,
Exactly.
according to who, according
Exactly.
to what, right? So I would just possibly adjust your expectations, right? And realize, okay, there are multiple ways of getting there, just like the hows. And if it is truly a goal that you want, well, maybe it's just not in the time scale that you thought, right? Because you want it by the end of the year, but what's the end of the year, right? That's just an arbitrary time that you picked, right? The end of 5 years. Well, what happens if it happens at the end of six, right? So is it still not worth going after? So if you truly want that what, right, then you might have to just adjust that time scale appropriately, and along the way, yeah, you might have to recalibrate in terms of where you are, because if you're close, if you're at the 4 year and 360th day, right? But you're another 4 months to reaching that goal. Are you going to stop, right? Versus, you know what? I'll keep going. So, yeah, a lot of it is taking that supposed and the should words, right, and saying like, again, is this aligned with what you want? Is this where you want to be? And focusing on the you part, and sometimes there is influence from parents, significant others, and family and stuff like that, because you want it for them, and that's all good too. And then once you have, again, that what and the why is solid, how, just readjust, right? Change that how a little bit. Maybe it's not this job, maybe it's another job, maybe it's not that job, maybe it's starting your own side hustle, maybe it's different. There's so many different ways to get to what you want, and sometimes the refine, or maybe it's the spirit of what you want as well too, right? I was in a session, and I use this concept called an I want list, right? Where you just basically write I want, and you write it as fast as you can, like without judgment, without filtering, and do it 30 times if you can manage, right? And someone put like, I want a sandwich because it was lunchtime, so they were hungry, right? And then under it, they put, I want to be a starship captain because they were like a Star Trek fan. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, well, hold on. Well, what if? What if you went after that? It's like, what would you do? And you can kind of see his wheels turning. And what happened is they said, you know what? I might go down to the US and work at SpaceX, right? I might work for Richard Branson and his Virgin Galactic flights, or Jeff Bezos and his thing, or go down and find something at NASA, right? And I could be a starship captain, right? Now it's not like the Starship Enterprise or the Millennium Falcon one, but it would be like the space shuttle, whatever that would be up, and they could, and then they went back and said, you know what? I don't really want that. Right? It would be a nice thing to have, right? So going back and do that academic exercise, and then do the actionable exercise of going after and taking one step towards whatever goal that they want, and vector there. So hopefully I answered the
Absolutely,
question.
you
I
did.
answered it in a slightly roundabout way, but
No, I love that answer. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts there. Um, the next thing is networking, and I believe this is crucial. We touched upon it. Over here, majority, when I say here, Canada, jobs come through networking, and that's something which, if you, basically, it's fair to say, if you're networking well enough, you will not be jobless for a long time. And
Mm.
I have never found a time to be more true when you apply the saying that your net work is equals to your net worth. So that's the time we're
Mhm.
living in, especially with all the layoffs, etc., happening. How crucial is confidence to networking? Because I believe a lot of people aren't sure of how to network. And that's when the confidence takes a toll, because they're also looking at networking to ask somebody for a job. And there is a
Okay.
very clear, predefined ulterior motive to networking over there. That's
Yeah.
definitely puts you on a back foot before you even started. So, uh, A, confidence. How much of it do we need to start networking? B, some do's and don'ts that you can share.
Yeah. So on the first one, do you have a definition of confidence? Because confidence is so many things to so many different people.
I will go with your definition.
Okay. So my definition of confidence is quite simply like the belief in yourself that you can figure it out.
Right.
Right. So if you start with that and you go into networking, go into a conversation, and you can figure it out, right? How to build a relationship with them, how to connect, then yeah, you absolutely need that. Because if you don't believe that you can do it, well, there's an expression, he who thinks he can and he who thinks he can't is probably
Yep.
correct, right? And obviously switch your pronoun appropriately. But if you're going in there and going to say, oh, this is going to be a horrible conversation, I'm going to suck, I'm going to look like very awkward, well, that's not going to be a very good conversation. So at least if you start with, you know what, I'll learn. I'm not the world's greatest networker. I will have a conversation, and the next conversation will be a little bit better. And the next conversation after that will be a little bit better still, right? So if that is what you take as confidence, that you can improve, get better, and figure it out, then absolutely you need that, right? So it's switching people's mindset where confidence is not that you are have zero anxiety, zero stress, right? I kind of equate it to being courageous and fearless, right? Like being courageous, people are scared. People have fear, but they do it anyway. Being fearless is probably not a good thing because if you had zero fear throughout the world, it's actually not a good thing to have. Like fear is an important feeling. Stress and anxiety is an important feeling, right? It usually points us to areas that we care about, right? So, but you can adjust that perspective of where that stress is coming from. And to your point about the do's and don'ts, maybe it's just you haven't done much networking, right? So I often talk to folks and they say I can't network because I'm shy. I can't do it because I'm introverted, right? I usually say, well, you're actually neither. You're just new,
Yeah.
right? Like I take folks who like first time you drove a car, right? How good were you? You were like, I'm like looking there at the mirrors and all these things. Like it was probably a pretty scary experience, right? And then you did it again and it was okay. I got a couple things. You did it again. And after you do it 10, 20 times, it starts being easier and easier. And then now most people like they're texting when they're driving. There's a whole bunch of things they shouldn't be doing, right? And they're not the world's greatest drivers, but they're good enough,
Yeah.
right? So how long would it take you to get to that point, right? But with driving, like any skill, like you are constantly looking to improve. So networking, when was the last time you looked at that conversation, the coffee chat that you had and said, okay, what did I do well? What could I do better? Right? So if you're constantly looking to improve, the next one will be a little bit better. So that would be the obvious do or don't. And then for me, the fundamentals for networking, I say the answer to every how to network question is to care. Right. So now you just have to take care in the context of the other person because that person is just that, a person, right? Nobody wants to feel used. They don't want to feel like a transaction,
Absolutely.
right? So how do you care? So my approach to networking is what I call build meaningful connections. And I start at the back by making connections, make them meaningful, and then build. So connections, like, yeah, you have to go out. You have to send that request on LinkedIn. You got to ask for the coffee chat. You got to go up to someone at an event and say hi, that sort of thing. You have to do that. And then it becomes care, right? How can you care for that person, right? And usually it's about making it about them. So I typically say to network, not to get a job, which you mentioned because there's ulterior motive. It's hard to excuse that, but if you can park that for a minute and say, okay, what uh, is interesting about your life, your career? What am I curious about, right? How can I help you, right? If you're looking to follow any of those areas, then you're starting to show that care, right? And then you build it over time, right? Because it's very unlikely that within one 5 minute conversation, 45-minute conversation, this person is automatically a best friend, right? Sometimes it happens, but it's usually over, hey, it's you again. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah, how's it going, right? And after weeks, months, years, then this person becomes someone where you would want to kind of vouch for. And this is one of the things that I often point to folks where people network in the hopes of getting a referral, right? Someone to land their resume onto like the recruiter's or the hiring manager's desk, right? But I actually say, well, a referral is probably not enough. And there's two spectrums of referrals or a spectrum of referrals. So on one side, it's the referral is like, oh my gosh, Luki, he's fantastic. Like I've worked with him. He shows up volunteering. He always puts his hands up. He always gets things done and figures it out. Even though we don't think that someone can, he somehow manages, right? You should definitely hire him. He's amazing. And then there's the other side with, hey, this person just messaged me. Seems okay. Take a look. And then everything in between. So when you get a referral, it's usually that other one where like, hey, this person doesn't know you, right? You messaged them 2 days ago, and you're asking them to submit a resume. So really, that's just an administrative. They're just pushing paper from one state to another. That paper doesn't necessarily go anywhere, right? So if you build a relationship, then it gets to not a referral, but a recommendation. Like this person will advocate for you. So, oh my gosh, he's amazing. Yes, you want to hire him. He's great. He's fantastic. Um, versus the take a look, whatever you want, right? So that's I guess the context where people treat networking like hunting versus farming, right?
I love that
So I encourage
analogy.
folks to farm, yeah, to go out there, plant seeds, water them, give it sun, fertilizer, take away the weeds, and eventually, oh, here's some fruit. Here you go, right? Versus the hunting is like, boom, yeah, gotcha.
Absolutely.
Then what happens, right? So
I think
so hopefully that
uh,
answered the question again.
absolutely.
Confidence, absolutely important, but switched in a different context. And do's and don'ts is really care, build meaningful connections, right? And everything underneath that.
Absolutely, and you're late to the game if you're networking only to get a job. Like you mentioned, this entire analogy of farming versus hunting, I think that sums it up beautifully of how you should be able to approach, you should be approaching the entire world of networking, because that's really where I think. Success lies, because eventually, look at it this way, everything that we spoke about earlier, networking will give you an opportunity to learn from and about somebody else's journey. It will give
Mm-hmm.
you that opportunity to interact with somebody who comes from a different walk of life as well. While they may be in the same profession or probably different, but you're able to get that perspective and all the things that we spoke about. Probably find a mentor who can tell you, and they don't necessarily need to be from your industry, because
Mm-hmm.
leadership can be taught through leaders from different industries, and those skills are transferable, experiences are transferable. So definitely look at networking from that lens, as opposed to a short term fix or an immediate boost of injection that you need. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
this. Now, putting more perspective and zoning in on students. So, as a student, if I'm looking for a co-op opportunity at my favorite brand or company, or internship for those who don't understand co-op, what would you say would be my go-to strategy to secure my dream co-op for a student, leveraging network?
Yeah. So I mean, for me, the job search is basically is quite simple, right? To get an offer at that dream co-op or whatever, you need to go through interviews, right? To get those interviews, you need to either apply or network, right? Super simple, right? So on that vein, if we're going through the networking path, well, you want to start early, right? Because we're talking about farming, right? You can't plant the seed and expect something to grow
Yeah.
overnight, right? So if they're really set on this particular company, this particular whatever, then they should be starting in like first year, right? As soon as they can, right? Uh, if they don't have that option, well, start right now, right? Build relationships, connections, and find out as much about them, right? I often say to folks that if you want to know whether you're quote unquote networking correctly, you want to put what you're doing in the context of dating, right? And the problem is if you think of dating like a job search, like a professional marriage, where most people are networking, they're trying to have one night stands,
Yes.
right? I just met you. Hey, you want to come back up to my hotel room? What? I don't know you. Well, at least take me out to dinner first. Show me a movie, right? That sort of thing. And if you can kind of invest in that and build a relationship, have them get to know you, you get to know them, right? And add value, build those meaningful connections. Yeah, that takes time. Now, you might luck out, right? Because some people, there's the concept of fast friends, right? So you might have encountered someone where like, I just met you yesterday, but it seems like I've known you all my life, right? That happens, but I don't know, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, that sort of
Far and
thing.
few.
But far and few, yeah. So essentially, you have to nurture and cultivate those relationships, right? So start nurturing, right? And there's a quote out there, I think it's by Zig Ziglar, where you say something like, "You can have anything you want if you help others get what they want." So if you want that internship, people along the way, what do they want, and how can you get it for them, right? So, but the challenge is what they want might be different than what you expect. And if you can't get it for them, who do you know that can help them? So it would be networking, planting seeds, going to events, right? Things like hackathons or case competitions. Those are amazing because they can see you in action, right? They saw the presentation. They saw the quality of the work that you go through. I mentioned volunteering, right? Volunteering is one of the best forms of networking. If the student club is bringing in panelists, right? And one of the panelists is your future boss, and they have a great experience because it was organized so well, everything went smoothly, the communication was fantastic. They didn't have to worry about anything. Hey, do you want a job? I've heard that happen so many times with student leaders or folks in volunteer roles doing stuff because again they get to see you in action. Because the alternative is I see a piece of paper, right? Two or three of them, depending if there's a cover letter or transcript in there. And now I have to judge amongst all those pieces of paper and the hundreds or thousands of others that are there, which are all smart, right? They all have great credentials, but how do I tell them apart, right? Versus I met you, I was able to shake your hand, and I saw you in action, right? So it would be all of that and just allocating the time to do it, right? Because you have school, you have a part-time job, you have family and friends that you're busy with, but if you can allocate an hour a week, an hour a day to nurture and invest in those relationships, then it's just a matter of time for you to be able to land that dream internship. And the other part is maybe not be so myopically focused on the one role and extend your possibilities because at the end of the day, it is a competitive process. Sometimes it's timing, right? It just didn't work out for you. So, and if you just found out this podcast and listen to it like, and you're graduating in a year or your internship's going to start in 4 months, right? You only have so much time. So maybe you also hedge your bets and adapt the same strategies to other ones and then leverage that as a stepping stone to get to that dream role where it's not the co-op, but it's the full-time role or it's the role 2 years after you graduate. Like, because if you really want it, right, go after it. But again, may not be in the time frame that you wanted.
Love it. Stuff I wish I knew earlier. um, Do the application and the principles remain the same for new immigrants coming to the country who probably need to brush up a little more? I know that you don't like the term, but soft skills or emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, the newcomers, presumably they have more experience, so they have a little bit under their belt, but at the end of the day, it is a competitive process, right? So students have student clubs and volunteering and things like that. If newcomers, oftentimes when I talk to my recruiting colleagues, yeah, they will look to like, how have you over the last little time, however long you've been here, look to adapt to your time in the country. Hence the volunteer part, even like a part-time job, a survival job, right? At a quick serve restaurant or a gas station or whatever, right? So that shows a little bit that you know how things are done here, right? Because and you're humble, right? Because you're able to kind of quote unquote put yourself down to that level. But there's nothing wrong with that, right? So it's important. Um, but yeah, I would say that the same sort of things because a lot of again of the hiring process is risk mitigation, right? I have an assortment of folks to hire, right? Now this is a certain market, right? When the market was hot, it was easier because the talent pool was a little bit slimmer. But now there's so many smart people that are unemployed for whatever reason, and they have their pick, right? So I had a post recently where it says that hard skills get you hired and soft skills keep you employed. And
Hmm.
no employer out there wants to hire someone and fire them right away because they're a jerk or they can't do this on time or they can't work well with others or whatever, right? So that those soft
Love
skills,
that.
that emotional intelligence is super important, right? Because you might be the greatest coder, financial modeler, whatever it is that you're supposed to do. But if you can't align with the company's vision and kind of get things done, work well with teams and things like that, it's just going to be a really challenging element, right? And for those with technical skills, so let's say you're a 10 out of 10 on the technical scale, right? But your soft skills is like a 4 out of 10, right? Do you think they'll see you as a 10 or a 4? Well, probably somewhere in the middle, right? So you might be a 5 or something, but probably closer to the
Yeah.
bottom. But if you upgrade that to a 5, well, they might see you as a 6. If you upgrade that to a 7, they might see you as an 8. If you upgrade to an 8, 9, and then you're basically hired, right? So it's those soft skills, those intangible, the human skills, whatever we call them. I find that that's of growing importance because again, there's so many talented individuals, so many credentials with lots of great experience. It's hard to separate, and soft skills is the differentiator in my experience.
That's extremely valuable. Thank you for putting it. Again, love the fact that hard skills get you hired and soft skills make sure that you're not fired and you stay in the job and you start thriving. Love that takeaway. Next section. So we've spoken about the fact that how networking will land us an opportunity or a crack at the role that we want. Now, the next important tool that we need to have is our resume. So the conversation is going to be about resume in a saturated and competitive market, which pretty much every industry, every country is going through. How do
Mhm.
I make sure as a candidate I'm able to beat the ATS system through my resume, or for that matter, grab the attention of the HR professional who's going to have a very brief look at my resume? How do I stand out?
Yeah, you basically write what they want on the resume, right? I usually use the analogy of the game of bingo. Do you know how to
No.
play bingo? So bingo is a game where you have a card, 5 by 5, bingo, and then 25 numbers there, and I think one free space in the middle. But there is a drum of 75 numbers, kind of like a lottery, right? And they call out numbers on from the drum, and they'll say like B7,
Right.
right? And then you mark it off, I-23, and you mark it off. And if you get a line, if you get a whatever,
Okay.
you win, right? So the job description is the bingo
Right.
card. Like being able to produce reports is B1. Like managing stakeholders is I-23, right? Uh, uh, Producing regular compliance reporting is G52, whatever it is, right? And then the caller, the person who's calling out the numbers, that's your resume,
Right.
right? So if they're asking for B5 and you say G53, okay, and you say N24 and they say I92, well, I guess it only goes to 75, but um, that is the bingo card, the job description is what they
Mm-hmm.
want. Your resume is what you want to tell them. So what the big mistake that most people face is they grab, give me on ChatGPT like the top 27 bullets that are provided on the or relevant for this role and in this industry. So they get it and they put it in, but that's not what I asked for, right? Because if you think of the numbers 1 to 75 as the universe of everything, because everybody wants someone who's a team player, who can manage time, who can do whatever reporting that they need to do. But on a job description, they're only asking for 15, 20 of those, right? So if you're asking me for the 50 that I'm not asking for, sure, it'd be helpful, but you haven't told me that you can do these 5 things that I'm specifically asking for. So my concept is to reverse engineer, right? So you basically take your resume, you blank out the bullets, you grab the first responsibility on the job description and you copy it, you paste it, and you paraphrase it, and then copy, paste, paraphrase, copy, paste, paraphrase.
Hmm.
And then when they say B5, you on your resume have B5, right? Or B5.2 because like you change it and paraphrase it because you want to paraphrase it because plagiarism is bad, right? You don't want to copy and paste directly, but the copy and paste is that you hopefully keep 80%, 60% of what's
Right.
there, right? Versus changing, like ChatGPT will mess it up quite a
Right.
bit, right? With a better
Mm-hmm.
prompt, then you can leverage it because ChatGPT is
Yeah.
super helpful for that. Uh, but that's essentially what you want. The job description is what they want you to tell them. The resume should tell them what they want to hear. And that's how you beat the system every time, right? Now, not every time because there's so many people applying that they're looking for the top, call it 5 people in there. So if you're lucky number 6 or lucky number 7, it's just unfortunate, right? So it has to match with the job description, your experience as it relates to all that. But yeah, that's how you want to do it. Put in the work, right? Because too many people are lazy where they just take, oh, let me take 3 or 4 words or 12 words from here and then put it on my resume. And that is the difference between like 80 and 20, right? So my approach is the 80, that approach is the 20, right? And 80 beats 20 every time.
Every single
That's
time.
just how
And
math works,
it
right?
answers my
Yeah.
next question as well, because if when you're taking this approach, you're putting in a little bit more time and effort, which will eventually yield you better results in the long run. So that also answers my
Yeah.
question of if I was to ask you quantity over quality, it would be quality. Look for those few jobs which you really see yourself doing and would be happy to do if you were to get them, and then
Yeah.
apply this reverse engineering approach that you spoke about. The next document,
Yeah. And I would actually say it's quality and
quality
quantity.
and quantity.
Unfortunately, because of this market that we're in, there's so many people like with the easy apply and the mass
Yeah,
apply, it's sometimes a numbers
right,
game. So quality
right.
first, but then you have to get the quantity up as well.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. And there's another document that goes with the resume, which is the cover letter. And my first question would be that does anybody even read the cover letter? Because wherever you look at videos, you look at, ask ChatGPT, it'll throw a random number, say that people look at your resume for under 3 seconds or 6 seconds, and they've
Mm-hmm.
identified whether you're good for the job or not. And we've just spoken about how to uh, create a winning resume, but then what about the cover letter? How much of time and effort should we be putting into cover letters?
Yeah, I mean, there's different camps to that answer. So to answer, does anybody read it? Yes, there are people who read it, right? But there are some people of the camp is like, well, they're also templated, they're also generic. I don't even bother, right? And there's others where like, well, this is an opportunity, another opportunity for you to sell yourself. So if you're not taking and investing that time, then you don't really want to work here, right? And there's a spectrum of everybody in between. So, like, which recruiter, which talent acquisition specialist are you going to get? you have no idea, right? So if you get the first one and you submit a cover letter, the worst thing that can happen is that you wasted a little bit of time because they didn't look at it, right? But if you get the second one and didn't submit a cover letter, then you're probably going to be in the middle or the bottom of the pile, right? So which situation is better? Investing some time and them not looking at it, or or not investing the time and them you being kicked out of the process, right? So cover letters, I find are relevant. So if you have the opportunity, goes back to the quality, right? If you're spending another hour creating something that's personalized and relevant for the company, then again, it seems like that you actually want the job, that you want to work here, right? If you're copying and pasting this templated document and sending it through, I usually tell people that nobody ever stands out by using
Yeah.
a template,
True.
right? It just makes sense. So if you're using that stock document, it's not going to be helpful. So if I had a suggestion, I would have you create a cover letter, but make it personalized, make it relevant for the role. And if they read it, then that could be the tipping point. And if they don't, well, hopefully you make it up in some other side.
Love it. Now we've progressed through to the next stage. Our resume has gotten shortlisted with the customized cover letter that we put in. Now we are at the interview prep
Sure.
stage. Given your experience of mentoring so many more than 25 people in your team, and God knows how many people and clients you've been able to help over the course of your career after that, what are some of the mistakes that you've seen people make during their entire interview process, and how can they prep better?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest mistake is to wing it, right? To show up and just hope for the best, right? It's like, if it'll be, it'll be, that sort of thing. Because interviewing, in my experience, is a skill, right? And with any skill, to be better, you practice, right? So there's very few of us who right off the bat can answer like a random
Hmm.
question and do really well. It usually takes us time to do it because you want to do it cleanly, concisely, crisply, that sort of thing. So you need to practice, right? Especially like the tell me about yourself question. One, if not the most common interview questions or some version of that, right? If you're not giving yourself a 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 in practice for that, then you're setting yourself up for a less than stellar interview experience, right? Because if you're thinking about it, that's your first impression. If you're starting off with a 9 out of 10 out the gate, that's amazing. If you start off with a 7 out of 10, right? Would you hire a 7?
No.
Most people wouldn't, right? So unless there's nobody else and 7 is the highest of the batch, but in this market, like most people have options, right? And they can pick people that are doing different things. So don't wing it, practice. And then like questions at the end,
Yeah.
right? Asking, that's another one. Because when I was interviewing, the worst thing would be like, oh, do you have any questions for us? Nope, no questions. It's like, what? Do you even want to work here? Like, you know everything about us that you don't have a single question. So take a few moments to come up with a couple of good questions for the interviewer.
Great advice.
Those would be the two big ones that I'd
Great
have.
advice. And one tricky question, I think a lot of us need help with this, is tell me about your weakness. How should we approach this question?
Well, I typically recommend folks to go after a something technical, right? Because the most common answer is I'm a perfectionist or like I take on too much work, right?
It's a
Those are the ones
lie.
that really well, it could be the truth, but not necessarily something that you want to admit to or that's easily helped, right? So if you go back to what the rationale behind the question is, it's really, are you coachable? Are you self-aware enough to know that if there's something wrong with how you connect with the team or something different, maybe not wrong, but it's just styles are different. Are you adaptable enough and to be able to change and work your way back into the situation, right? So the presumption is that the weakness is something that you're working on and you're being able to make better as well. So there's that aspect of it where you have to have done something about it or are doing something about it so that it's not as bad as it was before, right? I typically recommend folks to pick some sort of technical skill, right? Because it's hard to like, oh, I'm not punctual. right? I'm not good at working with people, right? That's hard to change, right? Versus to say, well, uh, I don't in your assets, or those are great ones. The things that it would be what is it, an asset to have, or it would be strongly encouraged or something like that. Like not
Yeah.
the requirements, but those ones. If you could find those where like, well, I know that uh, an asset would be to know Python
Right.
coding, right? So I don't have Python, but I've been working with a little bit of like Visual Basic macros or something, and I actually enrolled in a course on LinkedIn Learning for Python, and I've been growing to get a little bit better at it in anticipation for this role, right? So something technical, people can realize, oh yeah, they can probably figure it out. So that's probably what I'd say is pick something either that you've been consciously working on to improve and you can see a marked improvement over time, or to pick something technical.
That's some solid advice. Thank you for sharing that. Next up is LinkedIn and personal branding. So, while we've
Mhm.
gone through all this, how important is LinkedIn from from securing a job point of view? Because are recruiters looking at candidates' LinkedIn profiles to see what they're doing over there? Does that matter? Or is it more of a personal branding platform which can later you can leverage that for networking better?
Yes. Both. I mean, so there's no one recruiter, right? So there are recruiters that have their different tendencies. I know some recruiters that, I mean, they're submitting their resume, they're submitting their cover letter. I'm not asking them for LinkedIn, right? If I wanted their LinkedIn, I would ask
Right.
them to submit it, right? So they don't look at it all. And there's others, which I know that say, if they don't have a LinkedIn, I don't even look at your resume because like LinkedIn is one of those tools that is almost obligatory, right? If you don't have one, then you're not tech
Yeah.
savvy enough, right? It's like you don't know how to use
Yeah.
a smartphone. Like how is that possible even, right? So it's that
Right.
spectrum. And again, do you know which recruiter you'll have? No, so it's better to have it than to not, right? And it doesn't necessarily take that much effort. So some folks I think are overthinking of it, right? So, and your LinkedIn can be improved
Hmm.
over time, right? Spend 15 minutes today, get a nice professional picture, update your headline, grab what's in your resume and put it into the experience. Okay, done, right? And the next time, tweak and adjust, tweak and adjust, tweak and adjust, right? So it, it sometimes is easier to do it than most people think because they think, oh, I have to spend a whole weekend, a whole week, a
Yeah.
whole month in perfecting my LinkedIn. It's like, well, you could, or you could just spend 15 minutes every day for the next little while, making it a little bit better than it was
Love the
yesterday.
advice. In fact, I was chatting with a senior HR leader, Lydia Bowser,
Mm-hmm.
and she said the same thing that she has her resume open at least once a week to add any new project, tasks, or achievements that she's done. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
that you add a new achievement every single week, but it gives you an opportunity or that window of 5 to 10 minutes to look at your document once a week from a fresh perspective to chip, chop, change, adjust anything that you want to make, as opposed to, like you said,
Sure.
looking at a weekend and say that this is all that I'm going to do. And eventually, of course, quality suffers. So thank you for sharing this. The one tricky part in on a LinkedIn profile is the about section. So how are we
Okay.
supposed to copy? How are we supposed to address that? And is it
Okay.
uh, advisable to copy paste your profile summary from your resume and stick it into the about section?
I mean, it depends on the quality of that writing from beforehand. But the way that I encourage folks to think about it is if you can imagine that your future boss is on your profile and looking at the about section, what would you want
Hmm.
to tell them? Right? Simple as that. Right? It doesn't have to be the cover letter, dear sir or madam, I'm applying to a job as what I have 15 years of experience, blah, blah, blah. I feel it should be more of a conversation and just saying, okay, hey, this is why you
Yeah.
want to hire me, right? These are the amazing things that I've done. These are the amazing things that I can do for your organization. Reach out to me if you
Yeah.
feel I can help. Something as simple as that.
Thank you.
And the more that you can have in a story and tell me a specific example, the better, versus just a laundry list of a bunch of bullets of stuff from your resume. Then stories tend to be a little bit more compelling versus just lists
I
of
like
stuff.
that.